For the critics of universal basic income, a common complaint is that it's just too unrealistic, that society wouldn't be able to adapt to UBI, so we should just stop pretending that it could ever happen. So let's compare a similar scenario to our own. Is our society actually closer to UBI than we might have realised? What are the desirable aspects? And have people stopped the will to work, as predicted by some of the critics? As a case study, we'll be looking at the world of Les Misérables. We'll go song by song through France in 1862. There will be plot spoilers.
Now, prisoner 24601, your time is up and your parole's begun. You know what that means.
Yes, he's free.
No. Follow to the letter your itinerary. This badge of shame you'll show it till you die. It warns you're a dangerous man.
I stole a loaf of bread.
In this opening scene, we're introduced to Jean Valjean, and we learn that he's been arrested for stealing a loaf of bread. Just like Breaking Bad, if the original story had happened in a different country, well, it would be easily resolved. That would be the end of the story. If Walter White had cancer in the UK or Australia, well, he'd be covered by government insurance, and that would be that. He wouldn't be required to set up a drug empire. And, if Jean Valjean was hungry and we had UBI, then he would just receive enough money for food and shelter. He wouldn't need to live under false identities and go on the run for the rest of his life. Notice too that the prisoners are doing grueling work in the dry dock. If we had UBI, would anyone choose to pull ships out of the water? Or would such tasks need prisoners as labourers? By having prisoners perform any labour, there's a real risk that the prison population could be deliberately increased so as to enable more cheap labour to occur. Such is the state of affairs in the US, especially with their private prisons. At number 6 for prisoners per capita, the US has comparable rates to Turkmenistan and Panama. But back to the point, if people's basic needs were met, the quintessential, justifiable crime, stealing a loaf of bread, would cease to be a thing that ever happens. Number 2, at the end of the day. In listening to the plight of the poor, let's focus on this particular part.
At the end of the day, you get nothing for nothing. Sitting flat on your bum doesn't buy any bread.
There were children back at home, and the children have got to be fed, and you're lucky to be in a job and in a bed. We're counting our blessings.
We see the same reality in modern Australia, that there are people who are unemployed despite feeling that they want to work, despite feeling that it would be good luck if they end up in a job. The sentiment that you're lucky to have a job comes in stark contrast to the preceding line, sitting flat on your bum doesn't buy any bread, expressing the typical trope that unemployed people are just lazy. In thinking about why jobs even exist in the first place, let's consider this famous passage by Adam Smith in The Theory of Moral Sentiments, 1759. The rich only select from the heap what is most precious and agreeable. They consume little more than the poor, and in spite of their natural selfishness and rapacity, though they mean only their own conveniency, though the sole end which they propose from the labours of all the thousands whom they employ be the gratification of their own vain and insatiable desires, they divide with the poor the produce of all their improvements. They are led by an invisible hand to make nearly the same distribution of the necessities of life which would have been made had the earth been divided into equal portions among all its inhabitants, and thus, without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interest of the society and afford means to the multiplication of the species. The point here is that if we structure our economy around the fulfillment of bourgeois whims, then sure, it's hard to justify it morally, but at least it gets the job done. We live on and have children. Some would argue, however, that in 2023, it's not really honest to just shrug this off, and that structuring our economy around the fulfillment of bourgeois whims is working out really badly for us. Number 3, stars. Here we hear Javert make a variety of claims about honour and morality, but let's draw our attention to these lines.
Those who follow the path of the righteous shall have their reward. And if they fall as Lucifer fell, the flames, the sword.
Is this not an honourable way to run a society, that good, honest people shall have their reward, and you're only punished if you sin? In thinking about American society, though, it's very much a dog-eat-dog world, and you're totally able to be rewarded while not being especially honest or commendable. The converse is also true. You might be an upstanding citizen, but if you happen to fall ill like Walter White, then bad luck. Would a UBI be a more righteous society? Would Inspector Javert have as many fallen angels to chase in such a society? Another valuable insight is gained at the end of the song.
Lord, let me find him, that I may see him, safe behind bars. I will never rest till then. This I swear by the stars.
We see here that Javert regards his job to be his life's purpose, his calling. There's no mention of his desire for a bonus or the bedazzled shoes he'll be able to buy afterwards. Neither does he mention his desire for sick leave or time in lieu. It's possible to have a job that's so fulfilling and inspiring for him that nothing else really matters, and we needn't worry about accounting overhead. People can have other motivations for work besides avoiding starvation. Number 4, Javert's suicide.
And must I now begin to doubt, who never doubted all these years? My heart is stone and still it trembles. The world I have known is lost in shadow. Is he from heaven or from hell? And does he know that granting me my life today, this man has killed me? Even so.
After just seeing how much Javert loves his job and how much he believes in his purpose, it's understandably devastating to have this belief disproven. Why had his job been justified, though? If we think back to Stars, the line was,
And so it must be, for so it is written on the doorway to paradise, that those who falter and those who fall must pay the price.
Okay, so his life's purpose was based around one sentence on a doorway, without much room for nuance. Does this sound familiar? The reality that hits Javert in the face is a similar reality that many of us are all understandably scared to face ourselves. What if our jobs have not been serving a higher cause after all? What if we've been sold a lie and our jobs have actually been morally reprehensible activities, punishing good people? These ideas are further explored in The Virtues of Being a Dole Bludger. There's an abundance of companies who knowingly harm their customers, who lie to their customers, or who harm people who were never even customers in the first place. Is your job one of these, which is helping to destroy the planet? Should you similarly jump off a high structure? Number 5. Who am I? In this scene, a man is arrested and it's thought to be the fugitive Jean Valjean.
They think that man is me, without a second glance.
When Jean Valjean, now under the name Monsieur Madeleine, learns of the situation, he has a dilemma to face.
I am the master of hundreds of workers. They all look to me. Can I abandon them? How will they live if I am not free? If I speak, they are condemned. If I stay silent, I am damned.
There are similarities with the earlier songs, expressing the idea that people without a job will be condemned. What's new in this situation, though, is the moral dilemma that arises without even doing anything wrong. Valjean had reformed his life, becoming the owner of a busy factory, then even being appointed as mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer. Being a political official is an honourable pursuit, isn't it? But back to the dilemma. It's not as though Valjean was back to stealing bread or going out on his way to do anything malicious. He was just minding his own business, but now learning of the other man's fate means that Valjean could be damned.
Must I lie? How can I ever face my fellow men? How can I ever face myself again?
If Valjean was living in a UBI society, then his return to prison for evading parole would not see the workers condemned. They'd be just fine. Just as lies build upon each other and sins build upon each other, we can say that the starting sin, forcing people to do bullshit jobs just to survive, is a seed from which other sins will readily grow. Valjean considers the possibility, why should I save his hide? We might go a step further and ask, what if Valjean had never even learned of the man's fate? Would Valjean be guilty then? There's a similar logic in the classic trolley problem. Having been presented with the problem and the opportunity to pull the lever, can you really say, this has nothing to do with me, I'm not going to get involved by pulling a lever? Philosopher Peter Singer has a similar example and argues that since we know of so much suffering in the world, we have a moral responsibility to do something about it. Sure, your actions could stifle someone else's ability to continue their job, but if you know these people are suffering and you do nothing, how can you ever face yourself again? Number 6, the confrontation. When Javert comes to arrest Valjean for violating his parole, Valjean tries to stress the importance of his predicament.
Before you say another word, Javert, before you chain me up like a slave again, listen to me. There is something I must do. This woman leaves behind a suffering child. There is none but me who can intercede. In mercy's name, 3 days are all I need.
The lesson here is perhaps that government punishments, lacking in nuance, can easily cause more harm than good. Valjean had already been on the run for years. If he was arrested 3 days later, would it make any difference? Of course, considering each person's circumstance in isolation would be arduous, so perhaps it's worthwhile to give out benefits universally without requiring people's particular circumstances to be overanalyzed. Later in the song, there's another lesson for us.
You must think me mad. I've hunted you across the years. Men like you can never change a man such as you.
Our own society markets schooling as something purely for youths and pushes people onto a relentless treadmill, locking them into one career path where changes are difficult. People need experience to get more experience. Resumes are analysed only superficially and with stigma. Why do you only spend 7 months at this company I've never heard of? He must be the problem here. He must be a bad worker. Besides liberating us from bullshit and immoral jobs, UBI also gives us the time to pivot our careers, learning new skills and changing track along the course of our lives. Number 6, Castle on a Cloud.
Aren't any floors for me to sweep? Not in my castle on a cloud. There is a room that's full of toys. There are 100 boys and girls. Nobody shouts or talks too loud. Not in my castle on a cloud. There is a lady all in white, holds me and sings a lullaby. She's nice to see and she's soft to touch. She says, Cosette, I love you very much.
The difficulty in listening to this song is the fact that it's very easy for us to imagine how painful it must be for Cosette to miss out on these things. A place where she has friends and someone who loves her. She's really not asking for a lot here. When critics of UBI complain about the cost, I think it's easy to forget what people actually want. I think it's easy to imagine a world where we're no longer interested in cars as status symbols or keeping up with the Joneses. The relentless attention economy is lowering our IQ and making us unhappy. In a UBI society, maybe we'll be treating houses as homes rather than as investments.
In allowing people to live without having to trick each other into purchasing irrelevant bullshit, maybe we'll be able to enjoy the wind against our face as we get around on bicycles, unconcerned about ever larger SUVs beeping at us or reversing over pedestrians.
If we just direct our government's focus towards a harmonious life, solving actual problems in the world, then we mightn't need to spend much after all. Number 7. Do you hear the people sing?
Do you hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men? It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart echoes the beating of the drums, there is a life about to start when tomorrow comes. Will you join in our crusade? Who will be strong and stand with me? Beyond the barricade, is there a world you long to see? Then join in the fight that will give you the right to be free.
There is a growing movement underway to make UBI a reality. There's Basic Income Australia, plus political parties supporting it, like the Fusion Party, the Greens, and the Non-Human Party. Throughout history, though, freedom is always something that we've had to fight for. Even Australian society is not as democratic as we often think it is.
The state media frames every election as a two-horse race between both parties, or two of them. And even Wikipedia picks winners in advance and treats other candidates as just footnotes.
I was exposed to this recently when running in the federal by-election for Aston.
The candidates are hard to miss here in the southeast of Melbourne. The Liberal Party is running Rashina Campbell, a successful barrister. Labor has nominated long-time union worker and mum of two, Mary Doyle. But both parties, both candidates...
Because I don't like either side of politics.
In this report made by the state media, ABC, they only talk about the existence of two of the five candidates and fail to acknowledge that the Liberal candidate Rashina Campbell is married to a prominent guest on ABC television shows. The only coverage for the rest of us is simply to appear in the background while the ABC is talking to their two preferred candidates. However, this isn't quite as bad as how I was framed by Sky News.
Mr Owen Miller is the Fusion Party candidate at the Aston by-election, candidate who has advocated for murdering infants, who has defended terrorists and who says the Unabomber did nothing wrong.
The fact that he thinks that we should question the Unabomber's motives and that be a little bit more sympathetic to what his motives might have been.
The man preferenced by Labor and the Greens has written an article saying what the Unabomber got right, that to consider the Unabomber a crazy person is intellectually dishonest.
I think that's pretty despicable.
There is indeed an article, What the Unabomber Got Right, but I didn't say he did nothing wrong, and besides, none of this has anything to do with the policies I was proposing for Aston. The reporting on policy was light, reporters were more interested in whether the candidates were locals, and similarly, the billboards were superficial. Mary Doyle was putting locals first, and Rashina Campbell was a strong voice for Aston. What would she be saying with her strong voice? What were the policies of either of these major parties?
Need someone to help us.
Some new policies were being pitched at this election, that we could use technology, especially open source software, to automate away all our demeaning jobs and drive the cost of living to zero, no longer being forced to look busy or to deceive each other to earn money and put food on the table. Despite the coverage, the Fusion Party scored our best result ever, almost 3%. So the movement is growing for voters to choose parties based on ideas rather than pre-existing popularity. Voters are increasingly becoming aware that the system is not serving their interests and that we need to make fundamental changes in our society. To help this happen, we need people to spread the word about what's possible. Please share these ideas with your friends. We need to rally the people. Is there a world you long to see?